don't remember taking this," David muttered, squinting at the old photograph in his hand. He was standing in the attic of his late grandfather's countryside home, the air thick with the scent of dust and aged timber. He'd come to clear the place out, sell it maybe, but something about the attic made him pause. Cardboard boxes lined the walls, some spilling over with black and white photos, their edges curled from time. The photo in question showed a dimly lit hallway, peeling wallpaper, a crooked painting, and a faint silhouette at the far end. It wasn't just eerie, it was wrong. David had no memory of ever being in that hallway. He tilted the picture towards the single shaft of light coming from the window. The silhouette looked like it was facing him, motionless, yet aware. "Where the hell is this?" he whispered. Later that evening, David sat in his grandfather's study with the photograph propped up on the desk. Every few minutes, his eyes wandered back to it. The more he looked, the more certain he became. He knew that hallway, or at least something in his bones did. It was a place he had forgotten, maybe from childhood, maybe from a dream. He decided to investigate. Pulling out more boxes, he found a folder marked Polaroid, 58 to 63. Inside were dozens of photos, mostly mundane, family gatherings, snow-covered driveways, birthday cakes. But then there it was again, that same hallway, shot from a different angle, and again, always with that figure, always with that heavy, suffocating stillness. Obsessed, David tried to find the location. He scanned the photos for clues. A wallpaper pattern, a light fixture, anything. Days passed. He barely slept. One image had a window in the background, and through it, a sign. He enhanced the photo, revealing the faded words, Marin Hollow Orphanage. But Marin Hollow had burned down in 1965. A lightning strike, according to the records. All children evacuated safely, or so it was said. But when David drove there, something odd happened. The ruins weren't there. Instead, nestled in a dense cluster of trees, stood a house. A small, two-story home with peeling paint and a hallway that matched the photo exactly. The door creaked open with a push. No lock, no resistance. The house smelled like mildew and rot, but there was no graffiti. No sign of teenagers or urban explorers. It was untouched, as if waiting. He stepped into the hallway, the same wallpaper, the same crooked painting, but there was no figure. He pulled out the photo to compare. That's when it happened. A sound, like a camera shutter. He spun around. No one, just silence. He laughed nervously, trying to dismiss it. Then came another click. This time closer. David reached for his phone to use the flashlight. As he lit the hallway, his breath caught in his throat. On the walls, dozens of framed photographs. None of them had been visible a minute ago. They all showed different people. Some terrified, some asleep, some unaware. But all caught in that very hallway. And in each photo, always at the edge, there it was, the silhouette. One photo made him stumble backward. It was him, standing at the attic window of his grandfather's house, holding this very photograph. That shouldn't be possible. He hadn't taken any photos. Then the last frame fell from the wall and shattered. Its image was blank, except for the silhouette, now larger, now closer. He ran, but the front door wouldn't budge. He sprinted upstairs, hoping for a window. The rooms were barren. save for more photographs lining the walls. Each one newer, sharper. He saw himself walking, looking, reacting. Someone, or something, was documenting everything in real time. He screamed out, "Who's doing this?" No reply, only the soft whir of something winding. He turned toward the sound. An old Polaroid camera lay on the floor, its lens aimed straight at him. The shutter clicked. A photo slid out. He picked it up with shaking hands. His face, eyes wide, mouth mid-scream. Behind him, in the photo, the silhouette was now just inches away. Everything went dark. Not blackout, something deeper, a swallowing of presence. He could still feel the floor, the walls, but he couldn't see. The camera clicked again and again, flashes without light. His breaths came in gasps. Then he heard footsteps, slow, wet, echoing in a way that felt too close, too personal. He cried out, begged for it to stop. A hand touched his shoulder, ice cold, wrong in every sense. The camera took one last photo, and everything stopped. Days later, the house was gone. Just gone. The trees had grown thick over the clearing. Authorities said David must have wandered into the woods and got lost, but his car was found parked perfectly, his belongings untouched, and in the attic of his grandfather's house, on the desk, sat a single Polaroid, a picture of a hallway, and the silhouette, and David, staring into the lens, silently screaming. It started with an old box, one of those dusty, unlabeled cardboard things found buried in a basement corner, soaked slightly from years of forgotten floods. Peter hadn't intended to go down there, not really. He was just trying to trace the foul, musty smell that had begun creeping into the kitchen. But there it was, wedged behind rusted paint cans and yellowed newspapers. A box marked only with a date, July 1959. Peter was a hobbyist photographer in his late 40s, divorced, living alone in a house his great-uncle had left him. He figured the box might have old family photos, but when he pulled back the flaps, his brows tightened. Inside was a single black camera, a Kodak Brownie, and beneath it, a bundle of photographs wrapped in wax paper, sealed with brittle twine. The moment his fingers brushed against the camera, a chill darted up his spine, as if the air itself had shifted. The photos were peculiar, each one black and white, as expected, but something was wrong. The first image showed a dining room that looked eerily similar to Peter's own. Not exactly the same, but close. Same layout, same wallpaper pattern. Except the furniture was wrong. It was older, and the table was set for a dinner Peter had never prepared. The second image made him sit down. It was his bedroom, but the mirror showed someone standing behind the photographer. Someone tall, blurry, almost translucent. There was no one else in the room when Peter had opened the box, yet the reflection was undeniably recent. It wasn't just some old family image. These photos looked new. Peter didn't sleep that night. He left the lights on, the camera untouched on the dining table. The wax paper wrapping sat beside it, as though taunting him. Curiosity clawed at him. At dawn, he brought the camera to his friend Marla, a retired photojournalist who now restored vintage photography. When she opened the back, her eyes widened. "There's undeveloped film inside," she said, her voice low. "But Peter, this film hasn't been manufactured since the 60s. Against Marla's warnings, they developed it together. the dark room filled with the scent of chemicals and dread. As the first image surfaced, both of them stared in silence. It was Peter, sleeping in his bed, taken from the foot of the mattress. The timestamp etched faintly in the corner read, 2 nights ago. More photos developed. One showed Peter cooking, another brushing his teeth. All candid, all from angles impossible to replicate unless someone had been inside his home. Marla grew pale, whispering, "These aren't just pictures. Someone's been watching you." Peter checked his security cameras. Nothing. No footage. No intrusions. He changed the locks. The next morning, a new photo sat on his kitchen counter. It showed Marla, in her garage, developing the film, taken from outside the window. Terrified, Peter returned to the box. He sifted through the paper and found one negative sleeve stuck to the bottom. Only one photo. He scanned it into his computer and enlarged it. His fingers trembled. It was a wide shot of his backyard. In the corner, behind a tree, was a tall figure holding the brownie camera. Its face was blank, featureless, but its stance was familiar, almost like a mirror image. When he zoomed further, he could see its hand, the same scar he had on his right wrist. Peter began to unravel. He stopped sleeping altogether. Voices whispered through the walls at night, words he couldn't make out. Every mirror in the house began fogging on its own, even without heat or water. Sometimes he'd see someone standing behind him, just for a split second, always tall, always just out of focus. He burned the photos, every single one. He smashed the camera, buried the box behind the house, poured concrete over it. But it didn't end. The next night, a new photo appeared under his pillow. It showed him asleep, with ashes on his chest. Marla disappeared. No notes, no phone activity, nothing. Her home was left untouched, her car in the driveway. The only thing missing was her vintage camera collection and her copy of the photo of Peter sleeping. The police questioned Peter, but there was nothing to hold him for. No prints, no footage, just rumors. He tried to move, 3 towns over, into a cramped apartment. No basement, no boxes. Still, every few nights, another photo appeared. Always recent, always him. Then, one day, he found a mirror in the hallway fogged up. A message scrawled across in dripping letters. "You developed me. Now I'll capture you." Peter's reflection didn't move when he did. It started with an old photograph, not a digital image, not a print you'd get from a store. This was an actual aging photograph, tucked inside the lining of a second-hand coat Mark had bought from a flea market on the outskirts of St. Paul. The coat had a heavy wool texture and reeked of mothballs and something faintly metallic, but it was the hidden photograph that made Mark freeze. He'd felt a slight crinkling in the inner pocket and pulled out a black and white photo, yellowed with time. It showed a family of 5 standing stiffly in front of a 2-story wooden house. The photo was dated, handwritten in blue ink on the back, October 9th, 1956. That wouldn't have been strange, except every single person in the photo had their eyes scratched out. Not printed defects, deliberately scratched out. Deep, ragged gouges, as if someone had attacked the photo in a fit of rage. Mark showed it to his wife, Emily, who laughed nervously and told him to throw it away. But something about it gnawed at him. That night, Mark couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the picture, about those eyes. Not just because they were gone, but because he felt they were still watching. He got up at 2:12 a.m., unable to resist, and went back downstairs to the living room where he'd left the coat. The photo was still there, resting on the side table. He stared at it under the lamp's pale light, then turned it over again. October 9th, 1956. No names, no location, just that date. As he traced the ink with his thumb, something cold prickled up his spine. The moment he set the photo down, the house creaked, not like old houses do when they settle, but like footsteps, deliberate, measured. He called out to Emily, trying to make it seem casual, but his voice cracked slightly. No answer. The silence that followed felt staged. The next morning, Emily looked tired. "Did you come into the bedroom around 3? She asked. "I thought I heard someone breathing at the door." Mark hadn't, but instead of saying no, he just nodded vaguely. He didn't want to admit he'd spent nearly an hour staring at the photo, convinced the house in the picture looked familiar, though he couldn't place it. Later that day, Mark scanned the photo and uploaded it to a vintage photography forum, asking if anyone recognized the architecture or location. Within an hour, a user responded with a link. "Looks like the old Ashcroft place," the message read. "Burned down in 1957, total loss, family never found." His heart pounded. He clicked the link. The article was grainy, a scan of a local newspaper. It confirmed the date, October 9th, 1956, the day the family vanished. The next day, the house burned, and the photo. It had been taken just before they disappeared. That night, Mark dreamt of fire, of screaming, of 5 blurred faces melting into black voids. When he woke up soaked in sweat, he rushed downstairs again. The photo had moved. It was no longer on the table. It was inside the coat pocket again. Shaking, he pulled it out. This time, the back of the photo had something else, another line of handwriting. "He watches through what is taken." He gasped and nearly dropped it. That line hadn't been there before. Emily denied writing it. "Maybe we didn't see it," she offered, voice thin. But she didn't sound convinced. Neither was he. They both stared at the photo, at those gouged out eye sockets, and for a split second Mark thought he saw one of the figures in the picture move. Just slightly. A shift in posture, a tilt of the head. A week passed. Strange things escalated. The smell of smoke in their bedroom with no source. Small puddles of blackened water at the bottom of their stairs. The constant sensation of being watched, like a weight on their chests. One evening, their daughter Lucy began screaming from her room. When they rushed in, she pointed to the corner. "The man with no eyes," she sobbed. "He came out of the picture." Mark turned to the photo again. This time, one of the figures was gone, completely vanished. Where there had been 5, now there were 4. He didn't tell Emily. He just quietly started researching the Ashcroft family. He learned they had 3 children, all under 10. The house was never rebuilt, but the photo had somehow survived. He began to wonder, was it ever meant to be found? Emily began having night terrors. She'd wake up clawing at her face, whispering, "Don't let him take my eyes." Mark was barely sleeping. When he did, the dreams felt real. He'd see the house again. But inside, the rooms were endless hallways filled with photographs. Some faces were whole, some mutilated, some were theirs. One night, he finally went to the attic, clutching the photo. Something had been calling him up there for days. As he stepped onto the creaky floorboards, he saw a shadow pass. Not a trick of light. A clear, defined shadow with no body to cast it. The air turned freezing. His breath smoked out in front of him. On the far wall, someone had scratched into the wood. Ashcroft lives. Beneath it, his own name. Fresh. Emily took Lucy to her mother's house the next day. She couldn't take it anymore. Mark stayed. He said he needed to understand what was happening. That night, the photo changed again. All 5 figures had returned. But this time, the 5th one, the tallest, looked just like him, and it had no eyes. Terrified, Mark tried to burn the photograph, but the fire wouldn't touch it. The flames curled around it but never left a mark. Instead, smoke rose from the paper and formed words in the air. The moment is frozen. The watcher remains. Then came the knock. A slow, deliberate tap on the front door. Mark stood frozen. The knock came again. He moved to the window but saw no one. Only his own faint reflection in the glass. Except it blinked. The next morning, Emily called. No answer. The police were sent. They found the coat on the floor. The photo resting on top. A new figure had joined the others. A 6th, barely visible, but tall, head slightly tilted. When Lucy saw it, she pointed and whispered, "That's Daddy. But he's not smiling." No trace of Mark was ever found.